This recent mainstream media firestorm has not only sparked outrage over elite college admissions, but, of course, opened the shyster floodgates for the boohoo Me Toos to cash in. Multiple big money lawsuits have already been initiated, but I digress. Centered on Rick Singer, the reported ringleader, a host of mommy and daddy celebrities and corporate big shots, this controversy erupted days ago, but is already evolving into a whole new wave of college controversy, mostly to the benefit of the sinister progressive agenda, of course, but lost in the sea of liberal media propaganda and mandatory Twitter outrage is the real story behind this scandal. Of course, no one with a brain and some common sense is surprised that bribery and corruption exists where elitist liberal colleges and wealthy people intersect. So why all the fake outrage? Why are the mainstream media, politicians, and just about everyone who has a public voice carrying on as if this is all a big revelation? Well, aside from the ratings and attention these people get, there is a more insidious agenda at work here. As usual, the liberal agenda. The liberal media is licking its chops over this sensational scandal that flopped right into their laps, since it lets them run amok with their incessant white privilege narratives. However, the truth in this whole controversy is actually, factually, quite the opposite of white privilege. The real story here is about liberal repression of whites. Now, if you're still kind of sold on the idea of white privilege in this case, then consider some key facts. First, liberal doctrine dictates the law of equity. You see, equity in the liberal lexicon is just a feel-good term for white repression. Education has been utterly saturated with progressive filth for many decades, and you can be absolutely certain that all generations of white kids since, especially the decade of Barack Hussein Obama, have been repressed by the radical education system in the name of equity. The truth is that progressive education has been a perpetual failure, and progressive doctrine has miserably failed to create the so-called equality that they've preached incessantly. Therefore, to keep their masses from completely losing faith in it all, they've rigged the education system to progress the liberal agenda. Thus, they hold back white and Asian students and neglect them, so they can point to the data and say, look, we're helping the marginalized. But in reality, they are really just holding everyone else back from reaching their potential, while at the same time providing artificial supports for the groups they determine to be marginalized. It is no wonder why these rich white kids apparently cannot pass their college entrance exams. They are victims of liberal education, which has repressed them and not only taken away their potential, but has forced them to bear a legacy of white guilt and made them the enemy of all non-white people by inculcating generations of ethnic minorities with ideas of ongoing white supremacy, white privilege, and systematic racism. This is one thing. The next fact to consider is how these radically progressive colleges have been operating. They institutionalize absurd communist policies, which have produced a hostile, fascist, anti-fascist clone army that can assemble in a moment's notice to protest even a subtly implied microaggression. Liberal colleges peacock themselves as pioneers battling a social justice front against the big, evil, rich, white establishment. Yet they continue to operate in ways reminiscent of their pre-civil rights days, the days of the Democrat KKK party. There are still a lot of racist white liberals keeping minorities out of everything except the voting booths, but they're good at blaming Republicans and hiding behind their ethnic constituents. When you cut through all the pretense and narratives and look at the data, a very different picture emerges than what the liberal media conveys. We begin to unveil the truth. Here's the simple fact of the matter. There is no white privilege at play here. In fact, if anything, this is just another example of how white privilege is just a fallacy. Points of argument. If the people involved in this scandal had white privilege, then why did they have to fork over hundreds of thousands of dollars, $500,000 in some cases? Why didn't their so-called white privilege get them in the door? If white privilege existed, then why on earth did those people have to Photoshop their kids' faces on the bodies of other people? If white privilege existed, then their white faces would be enough to qualify them. Lori Loughlin was released on $1 million bail. Now, Be aware of the fact that our education system is so twisted by identity politics that there are 17 and 18-year-old black teens who get arrested for armed robbery, attempted murder, or rape, and are released on only $30,000 to $50,000 bail, only to return to their high school the next day. So where was Lori's white privilege when the judge set her bail at $1 million? The mainstream media did not give them a pass, so white privilege did not save them from the mainstream media scourge. Being white and wealthy, and given that some of them apparently donate to the Republican Party and some claim to be Christians, certainly didn't give them a pass with Fox News, who, according to liberals, is full of conservative bias. By the way, Fox News is just as guilty as the mainstream media in this case. In fact, they often, stupidly, pile in on mainstream media controversy to sustain their ratings, and actually lend credibility to liberal media narratives by running with face value stories like this. The fact is, there is no evidence of white privilege here. No. In fact, all the evidence suggests the contrary. Moreover, we can see that decades-long white privilege narratives pushed by schools and media have made things very difficult for white people, so much that even the wealthy and influential have to pay enormous amounts of money and cheat just to get the same opportunities that colleges and universities make concerted efforts to give away to boost ethnic minority enrollment. Let's take a look at the evidence and see how these progressives operate. According to this Journal of Blacks in Higher Education article, which shows stats for black student admissions in high-ranking universities for the years 2016 and 2017. It clearly shows that enrollment for blacks at high-ranking universities has substantially increased for most of the universities listed. Yes, that is right. This is a black publication showing black enrollment at top universities substantially increasing. If you follow their research, you will find many examples of black enrollment boosted at colleges and universities across the U.S. Virginia Tech reports 13% increase in black enrollment. Black students show progress in medical school enrollments. Xavier University experiences a surge in enrollment. Enrollment surges at a number of historically black colleges and universities. Clearly, we can see that renewed affirmative action efforts have boosted enrollment for blacks. However, here is where things start to get very interesting. This table shows college enrollment by ethnicity. By the way, the Title IV part at the top just means colleges who process financial aid loans. Here we can see that blacks compose 12.4% of the total college population, Hispanics 17.3%, Asians 6.1%, and whites 50.4%. Why is this significant? Well, take a look at the actual ethnic breakdown of the United States population now in 2019. Here we see that whites make up 61% of the population, blacks make up 12%, Hispanics 18%, and this doesn't include the 22 million illegals in this country, and Asians 6%. Because of these facts, we have to question why on earth colleges are trying so hard to boost ethnic enrollment when college enrollment numbers reflect the real racial makeup of the U.S. population. In fact, notice that white enrollment is 10% lower than the white population. And it's the only ethnic group that has lower enrollment numbers. All other ethnic groups are proportionate to their national populations. What we see here is that white people are actually the ones being disadvantaged by a false progressive system with a shady agenda. What you have not seen is that white enrollment in colleges has significantly decreased in the past decade across the board. This is due to progressive affirmative action policies which seek to keep out white people and Asians, but increase enrollment for blacks. By the way, you'll find that Muslim enrollment has increased significantly since the Obama era. Here's an article by the National Center for Education Statistics that discusses college enrollment trends from 1976 to 2015. It reads, "The percentage of American college students who are Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, and black has been increasing. The percentage of Hispanic students rose from 4% to 17% in all of U.S. residents. American Indian Alaska Native students was higher in 2015 than in 1976 by 0.1%. But during the same period, the percentage of white students fell from 84% to 58%. That's a 26% decline in white enrollment. Thus, universities hold back whites, give a boost to blacks, and carry on with grandiloquence as if they're institutions of righteousness. It is really important to ensure that Black Americans and all ethnic minorities have equal opportunity and that no group of people is ever oppressed for any reason in this country. However, think about all the liberal policies that take away from those efforts. Never mind the 22 million illegals in this country and the fact that Hispanics are by far the most underserved minority group in the U.S. education system, or that our country cannot even afford to properly educate this huge section of the American population. You cannot have more convincing proof that progressives have always been the people keeping minorities out of colleges in the past, because the entire U.S. education system has been totally run by progressives for 6 decades. Just like Chicago and New Orleans, which have always been under the control of liberals, have nothing to show for it but violence and destitution. Liberals lay claim to progress, but have shown the opposite. Now they are out to screw white people and Asians so they can act like champions of civil rights. If you have any doubt that there is a shady liberal agenda at play, then this article offers a perfect illustration for you. In this article from Inside Higher Ed, Focus on Diversity at Community Colleges, it reads, community colleges typically enroll a broad range of students, but many are doubling down on efforts to promote diversity and inclusion even as they face resistance, sometimes from within their own ranks. This means that colleges are making a great effort to increase ethnic enrollment. This is just one article, and it's not just community colleges, but all colleges and universities which have collectively been making this effort. What they are also saying reflects a nationwide purge in education as well, the attrition of white teachers, to hire more ethnic minorities, often with an emphasis on hiring blacks and placing them into positions of leadership, administration, and management. Let's continue reading the article. For many two-year institutions, it didn't take a racist incident, a protest, or controversial guest speaker to jumpstart efforts to promote more diverse and inclusive campus environments. Many community colleges are heralded for having diverse student populations, but that perception hasn't made them complacent, especially as many go beyond their campuses and see cultural clashes happening in their communities. Quietly, more two-year colleges are investing in cultivating an on-campus culture focused on inclusion, equity, and diversity, and some are demanding that their employees fall in line. If you have a core set of beliefs, you simply state your core set of beliefs and live by them, said Michael Carter, Chief Diversity Officer at Sinclair Community College in Ohio. You can believe what you want to believe, but here at Sinclair, this is what we believe. Those who have a problem with Sinclair's focus on inclusion and diversity don't have to work here, said Carter. One way community colleges are becoming more proactive about diversity is with the increasing emergence of the Chief Diversity Officer role. And a growing number of diversity officers in the sector serve as more than a federally mandated Title IX coordinator or a director in human resources who focuses on equity. These administrators at colleges like LaGuardia Community College in New York and Portland Community College in Oregon have a direct line to the president as cabinet-level administrators and are holding academic departments on campuses accountable for being inclusive. Carter and Sinclair are focusing more on equity and inclusion by carrying out the college's first diversity audit, which was organized by an independent consultant. They're hoping that the audit will measure how well Sinclair is doing when it comes to promoting diversity in everything from recruiting faculty members and administrators to student supports and community relations. The audit will also inform the college on where it needs to improve and how to be truly equitable, although the administrators have already begun to examine areas where Sinclair can improve. Now, they are not hiding their sinister little agenda here at all. Heralded means they gain acclaim and receive accolades in the progressive community. Quietly means they don't want to advertise it, but they are going to keep progressing their radical agenda at a rapid pace. It also signals a key doctrine for progressive insiders. those esteemed activists who use their positions to manipulate areas of education and politics, that is, for the underlying liberal cause. Investing requires putting resources into something. Investment also involves risk, and this means that they have to be bold, brash, and unapologetic in their actions to defy and undermine the establishment in order to advance their progressive cause. Cultivate is another important word in the liberal lexicon. It means to develop. This is how progressives think about education, as a process for cultivating liberal clones. A liberal clone factory. Equity never simply means providing more supports or advantages to, as they like to say, level the playing field. No, it means to oppress the so-called advantage groups. They never, ever intend to actually achieve equality. On the contrary, it is not equality that they seek. In the end, it's total control. Inclusion is a progressive term for ensuring that a certain percentage of pepper is applied to each measure of salt, so to speak. They will not allow a white population to naturally sprout up anywhere and thrive. Diversity is a progressive term for achieving the desired ratio. Lastly, we see the word demanding and the phrase fall in line. What this means is that it's not optional, and that if colleges aren't doing a good enough job conforming and repressing white enrollment, then, well, we've all seen how liberals cannibalize their own when they fall out of line. So you get the idea. Chief diversity officers? Really? You need to understand what this means. These are well-paid people in positions of power, cabinet level, with access to presidential power and influence, who progressives have been installing in schools all over America. Realize also that chief officer roles in organizations typically have a staff under them, like an assistant chief officer and an administrative secretary, and those salaries add up. Multiply those salaries by numerous schools all over the United States. This is a lot of money that they are pouring in to this strategic system of policing organizations to ensure that the progressive agenda is being executed with fidelity, repressing whites and Asians and making sure racial quotas are being met. Realize also that they are talking about private auditing firms policing their police. Auditing isn't a one-time deal. This means that in addition to their army of strategically placed, powerful enforcers of progressive racial politics, are private oversight groups, which make sure that all of the chief officers are obeying Big Brother. It is also concerning that these are private firms because this means they don't have to have the kind of transparency and accountability that government oversight is supposed to have. For 6 decades, progressives have done irreversible damage to our entire education system. Even worse, they have done irreparable damage to generations of young Americans. This is why young liberals can't be talked to, reasoned with, convinced by truth or facts, and are 100% loyal liberal minions. This sinister progressive agenda is incredibly dangerous, and they are destroying our country. It is long past time to stop buying in to mainstream narratives. The facts and the truth reveal that reality is very, very different than what liberals would have you believe. This may be offensive to you social justice warriors out there, but you have to decide whether you are going to ignore the truth or continue on and on living in a manufactured reality. White privilege is a myth. That's why they call it unconscious bias, because there is nothing to be conscious of. What you do need to be conscious of are the truths that they never tell you and the lies that liberals constantly propagate.